And the mother of two daughters, ages 6 and 10, both of whom attend public schools in Montclair. I've been practicing law for almost a decade now, but before I went to law school, I earned a Master of Arts in Teaching degree, and I taught high school English for a couple of years in rural Maine. Over the past year, as I saw the changes in my older daughter's curriculum, I began looking into the Common Core state standards and the effects they were having on our kids' schools. As part of that inquiry, I also began looking at the new test to measure our kids' achievements, the PARCC tests. The more I learned, the more concerned I grew. I began writing about my concerns on a personal blog, Parenting the Core, and quite a few of my pieces, including one this morning, have been picked up by the Washington Post's answer sheet. I stand here today to tell you that the PARCC tests are not going to improve education or help our students. What it all really comes down to is a matter of trust. That's what a lot of this debate really boils down to. Trust, and where our opinions and plans for public education diverge, who we, as parents, can trust to have our kids' best interests at heart. Do we trust our children's teachers and principals, the people we can hold accountable on a personal level by looking them in the eyes and raising our concerns? And on a policy level, we can also hold them accountable by bringing any concerns we may have to our democratically constituted school boards, who are elected to deal solely with education issues? Or do we trust federal and state bureaucrats who are accountable to a broad swath of voters for far more than just education policy, and therefore, as a practical matter, outsource a great deal of their educational policy setting to private corporations, such as Pearson, which sells curricula and designs tests, all to benefit its own bottom line? In an ideal world, we could trust both, but unfortunately our world is far from ideal. I, for one, start out more skeptical of the for-profit corporation than of our local teachers, principals, and school boards. I was recently engaged in a discussion about the Common Core and PARCC with a parent who's a strong proponent. He shared a little bit of his story, which illustrated the trust issue for me. In short, his oldest child began education at a private school. The parents eventually learned that their child was lagging far behind his peers in the public schools and moved the child to the public schools. But because those parents' trust was broken early on by that private school experience, they've become huge proponents of testing to ensure that they receive up-to-date information regarding their child's progress. I hear and I can relate to those concerns. I think any parent can, although of course I find it ironic that it was a private school's failure that triggered them. My take, however, is different. As a parent, I start the school year each year trusting my children's teachers. Now, that doesn't mean that such trust can't be eroded over the course of an academic year. But over the years, in preschool and then in our public schools, of the 15 classroom teachers my kids have had, I've come across exactly one teacher who broke that trust. That's not perfect, but those are still pretty good odds. So I'm willing to trust our schools and our teachers with our kids and to trust that they have our kids' best interests at heart. If I find my trust misplaced, I'm confident I can go up our chain of command to remedy the issues. What those parents I told you about, whose trust in schools was broken by a bad private school experience, have effectively done is to substitute trust in their children's teachers for trust in a test, under the mistaken belief that a test will ensure real accountability. And perhaps in a world where the tests were trustworthy, there'd be no harm in trusting the tests. But unfortunately, given my inquiry into the PARCC test, I think those parents are going to discover that their trust in the PARCC is at least as misplaced as their earlier trust in their child's private school. The PARCC Consortium recently published its sample performance-based assessments, and I had a chance this morning to take a look at them. I have a fourth grader, so I was looking at the fourth grade PBA math assessment. Here's the sample question. Gian's family sells honey from beehives. They collect 3,311 ounces of honey from the beehives this season. They will use the honey to completely fill 4-ounce jars or 6-ounce jars. Gian's family will sell 4-ounce jars for $5 each or 6-ounce jars for $8 each. Gian says that if they use only 4-ounce jars, they could make $4,140 because 3,111 divided by 4 equals 827 remainder 3. That rounds up to 828, and 828 multiplied by 5 is about 4,140. Part A. Explain the error that Gian made when finding the amount of money his family could make if they used only 4-ounce jars. Enter your explanation in the space provided. Take a moment. Can you tell me the error? Here's the error. John's math was correct, but his reasoning was mistaken, because he rounded up to 828 instead of down to 827, when the 828th jar won't be completely full, so he can't sell it for $5. So since his family can only sell 827 full jars of honey, the answer should have been 827 times $5 per jar is $4,135. This is for 4th graders, 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds. And what is this question really testing? Is it, as the PARCC's proponents would state, testing whether kids really understand remainders and have the higher order thinking skills necessary to pick up on the trick in that question? Or is it, as is obvious to any parent of a 4th grader, testing whether our 9 and 10-year-olds are A, picking up on the word completely, i.e. it's testing reading comprehension, or B, testing whether our kids have the life and business savvy to make the connection under the pressure of a high-stakes test that in this one case, they should be ignoring the remainder instead of rounding to the nearest whole number. My concern is compounded by the emphasis the 4th grade Common Core standards and the Pearson-produced Envision's math curriculum purportedly aligned to those standards places on estimating, rounding, and reasonableness. This is a copy of one of my daughter's Envision math workbooks.
Ms. Blaine, you're going to have to go a little quicker.
I'll do my best.
I see you're reading again.
Yes.
I'm reading along with you. So
sure. Sure. The flag pages are all pages that ask the kids to rely on estimating, rounding, or reasonableness to arrive at their answers. It's not every page, but as you can see, the emphasis on those skills, which I'm not denigrating, is heavy. Given that emphasis, not only does this become a trick question, but the kids themselves are already primed to miss the trick by the emphasis their standards and curricula place on estimating, rounding, and reasonableness. Trick and other unfair questions like this are endemic throughout the PARCC practice tests I've reviewed. I'll tell you, you can read about the English language arts tests. I've already emailed you about those, okay? But one trend I'm sure you're aware of across the state is that many of our high schools have been eliminating midterms and finals to make room for PARCC. The ambiguity of the essay prompt, the ambiguity of these essay prompts and unfair math questions illustrates why eliminating local, teacher-created tests, midterms, and finals in favor of standardized tests is a bad idea. All teachers make mistakes, both in inadvertently drafting ambiguous questions and incorrectly grading answers, but kids are savvy and they can challenge their teachers on those mistakes when they can walk up to them and have a conversation. Pearson and PARCC, however, are accountable to no one. Our teachers won't even be allowed to look at, much less discuss, the PARCC test. They won't see the kids' results on a question-by-question basis or where they might have been tripped up by a trick. So there will be no one to tell us which questions were unfair, ambiguous, or otherwise problematic. That is, there's no accountability for Pearson. And as I've discovered this year, there is no question that even the Pearson materials, be they the PARCC practice tests or Envisions, that we do have access to, have plenty of mistakes. If the stakes for these tests were low, and the time they sucked away from real teaching was minimal, then I doubt that the outcry would be so intense. Instead, however, these are tests, even this year, unproven as they are, will make up 10% of classroom teachers' evaluations. And they will continue to take on an increasingly central role in evaluating our teachers, schools, and children. Not surprisingly, for those kids who don't make the cut, Pearson now also controls the GED test. I urge you to carefully review the PARCC sample test yourselves, keeping in mind the age level of the students who are intended to take them. Please recommend to the governor that we join the dozen or more other states, including most recently Mississippi, in rejecting the PARCC as a valid means of assessing our kids. New Jersey's kids deserve better. Our New Jersey teachers and principals are accountable to our local communities. Where individual districts have ongoing problems with ensuring educational equity, the state can step in through its quality review system to address those problems on a case-by-case, district-by-district basis. But the PARCC test is setting up a narrative that all of our schools are failing. After spending significant time reviewing what's happening in our schools and what's contained on a for-profit corporation's PARCC tests, I, for one, am confident the problem is with the test and not with our kids, our teachers, or our schools. Thank you.
Thank you.